Hey everyone, it's good to be back with you as we kind of keep diving into ways to, get through the holidays after you've lost someone close to you. And I think this time of year can be really hard when you're dealing with grief. Sometimes the very things that should bring joy can actually, they could just add more stress.
It's so true. And that's actually why we're focusing on tip 3 for today's deep dive, which is cutting back on seasonal stressors. Because when your heart's already so heavy with grief, those typical holiday pressures, they can feel just like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. Yeah. I can remember one year when even without any major grief going on, I just completely lost sight of what the holidays were supposed to be about. I got so wrapped up in trying to find like the perfect gifts for everyone that I completely maxed out my credit card. And I just felt completely burned out by the time Christmas Day actually rolled around. It sucked all the fun out of it.
Yeah, it's really easy to fall into that trap even when things are, kind of normal, right? But when you're grieving, you just don't have the energy reserves, right? Your emotional reserves are just depleted. So all those little everyday holiday hassles, the shopping, the decorating, the parties, they can just become completely overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to run a marathon with a sprained ankle.
That's a great way to put it. It's really important to be able to recognize those stressors so you can start to get a handle on them. And, the stuff we've been looking at highlights a few of the most common ones that we think will really resonate with people, especially during the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. One that really jumps out at me is like the pressure of social obligations. All those parties and gatherings that might have been fun in the past, they can suddenly feel really daunting when you're grieving.
It makes sense, right? These events, especially if they were something you shared with the person who died, can become incredibly painful reminders that they're not there anymore. The empty chair at the table, the inside jokes that nobody else gets. I mean, it can make it really hard to even imagine being in those situations.
I know. It's like everybody else is moving at normal speed and you're stuck in this like slow motion world of grief. And on top of that, everyone expects you to put on a happy face because it's the holidays.
Right, it's asking way too much when you're already going through so much.
Yeah.
And then there's the financial strain, which is tough for everyone during the holidays, but even more so when you're grieving.
Oh, for sure. Because then you add in funeral costs,
Yeah.
maybe a loss of income if the person who died was helping to support the family. I mean, it just becomes this giant weight.
Imagine a single parent trying to get through the holidays after losing their partner. They're already dealing with incredible grief, right? But now they also have to somehow afford gifts and make things seem normal for their kids, all while they're heartbroken themselves. It's just heartbreaking.
It really is. And the source material also talks about the pressure of expectations, especially around all the holiday traditions.
Mhm.
Like, if the person who died was the one who always made the gingerbread house or organized the caroling, it can feel impossible to even think about doing those things without them.
It's true. Traditions are so often deeply intertwined with the people we love, and when they're gone, those traditions can become a source of both comfort and pain at the same time, You want to hold on to those happy memories, but then just the act of trying to recreate them can bring up this huge wave of sadness and loss.
Yeah. It's like this tug of war. You want to honor their memory, but it's overwhelming to think about doing it all yourself.
That's such a good image, and it really highlights why recognizing these stressors is so important, right? It's the first step to taking control and finding ways to make the holidays a little less overwhelming, a little less heavy.
Exactly.
Talk-
So we've talked about the why, like why the holidays can be so incredibly difficult when you're grieving.
Mhm.
But what about the how? How can we actually start to manage and reduce these stressors so that we can maybe find a little bit of peace and maybe even some joy during the season?
Well, the good news is that the source material we've been looking at gives us some really practical strategies to do just that. And it all really comes down to giving yourself permission to experience the holidays differently this year.
Yeah, that's so important. I think we get stuck in this idea that we have to keep everything the same as if nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Like we have to pretend everything's okay. But really, it's okay to let go of those expectations and just be where we are.
The first strategy that I think is really important is this idea of prioritize and simplify. It's about figuring out what really matters to you this year and just letting go of anything that feels like an obligation or something you just don't need to do.
Right. So, for example, if you just can't imagine hosting a big family dinner this year, maybe you have a smaller gathering, just a few close friends or family members.
Mhm.
Or maybe instead of trying to recreate every single tradition, you just choose one or two that feel really special and let go of the rest.
You could even start a brand new tradition, something that honors your loved one in a way that feels right for you. It could be something as simple as lighting a candle for them or making their favorite dish. It's about finding those ways to honor their spirit without putting too much on your own shoulders.
I like that. And speaking of letting go, the next strategy is about managing social expectations. And I think this is where boundaries become super important, especially when you're grieving.
Absolutely. It's totally okay to say no to invitations that feel too overwhelming, even if it's something you normally would have enjoyed. And it's okay to limit conversations about your loss if you're not feeling up to it. You can have a little phrase ready, like, I appreciate you asking, but I'm not ready to talk about that right now, or something like that.
Oh, that's so helpful. Having those little scripts in your back pocket can make it so much easier to navigate those tricky social situations. It can really help you avoid feeling guilty or pressured. Which kind of leads us to the next strategy, which is easing financial pressures. We talked before about how grief can add to financial stress, and that's especially true during the holidays when everything seems to revolve around spending money.
Oh, for sure. It's true. But it's important to remember that the holidays don't have to be about spending a lot of money. It really is the thought that counts, not the price tag.
Absolutely. There are tons of creative ways to give really meaningful gifts without going broke. You can make something yourself, offer to help someone out with something, or even suggest a family secret Santa so that everyone buys fewer gifts.
I love that idea. It takes the pressure off of everyone, and it lets you focus on spending time together instead of stressing about stuff.
And it brings us to the next strategy, which is all about minimizing grief triggers. Because, let's be honest, the holidays are full of things that can bring up painful memories.
Right. So it's really important to pay attention to what those triggers are for you and then try to avoid them if you can.
So maybe that means skipping certain holiday movies or songs that bring back painful memories. Or maybe it means creating a safe space at home where you can go when those feelings get too intense, like a room with soft lighting and maybe some calming music and a cozy blanket or two. Just a place where you can be with your grief without judgment or expectations.
That's such a beautiful idea. It's about giving yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling and creating a space where you can honor those feelings.
Yeah, it's self-care in its purest form. And that actually brings us to our next strategy, which is self-care. And I think it's so important to remember that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, especially when you're grieving. It's essential.
It's like they say on airplanes, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first before you can help anyone else. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. And self-care looks different for everyone. For some people, it might be making sure they get enough rest. For others, it might be eating healthy foods or going for a walk in nature.
And sometimes self-care is about letting yourself feel joy, even when you're sad. It could be watching a funny movie, listening to your favorite music, or spending time with people who make you laugh.
Yeah, those little moments of happiness can make such a big difference. And sometimes self-care also means reaching out for support, which is our next strategy.
Because even though it's not always easy to ask for help, it's so important to remember that you don't have to go through this alone. There are people who care about you and want to support you.
Whether it's a friend, family member, a therapist, or a grief support group, connecting with people who understand what you're going through can be incredibly healing. It's like you're sharing the weight of your grief, you know. It makes it a little easier to carry.
I love that image. Sharing your burden with someone you trust can really make all the difference.
And finally, the last strategy that I think is really important is adjusting your mindset. This one feels really powerful to me because it's about recognizing that we actually have some control over how we approach the holidays.
It's about understanding that this holiday season will be different, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you love the person you lost any less, and it doesn't mean you can't find moments of peace and connection.
It's about shifting your focus from what should be to what is.
Yeah.
And finding ways to honor your loved one that feel right for you.
And one really powerful way to do that is by focusing on gratitude. Even when you're grieving, there are still things to be grateful for. It might be a warm cup of tea on a cold morning, a beautiful sunset, or a kind gesture from a friend.
It's about kind of like shifting your perspective, even just for a little bit, to appreciate the good things that are still there in your life.
Yeah, and that can be so helpful and kind of lightening the load of grief a little bit.
You know, as we've been talking about all these strategies, it just makes me think about how they all require a lot of self-compassion.
Oh, that's so true. I think we're so quick to offer compassion to other people, but when it comes to ourselves, we can be pretty harsh.
Yeah, it's like we expect ourselves to just like snap out of it
Yeah.
and go back to normal. But grief just, it doesn't work that way. It takes time. It takes gentleness, you know, and it takes like a willingness to really meet ourselves where we're at.
And to honor our own needs and limits when things are so tough.
Exactly. And I think that's like a really important thing to remember, not just during the holidays, but all the time. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to struggle. And it's okay to ask for help.
And it's important to remember that healing, it's not a straight line. You'll have good days and bad days, moments of joy and moments of, deep sadness. It's all part of the process.
Yeah. It's like navigating a winding path. There will be twists and turns, ups and downs, but eventually, you'll find your way through.
And, as you go through this holiday season, just remember that you're not alone. There are people who care about you. There are resources that can help. And even in those really dark moments, there's still hope to be found.
I love that. Hope is what keeps us going.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. What's one small act of self-compassion that you can do for yourself today? Maybe it's taking a long bath. Maybe it's saying no to something that feels draining. Maybe it's just letting yourself cry if you need to.
Yeah, whatever it is, just remember that you deserve kindness, you deserve support, and you deserve to find those moments of peace during this difficult time.
So well said. And to all of our listeners who are grieving this holiday season, we're sending you all our love and support. Remember to be kind to yourselves and know that there are brighter days ahead.
Take care, and until next time, we hope you can find moments of peace and comfort in the midst of it all.